Welcome to the Essential Skills for Humaning podcast, where we explore the fundamental abilities and insights that make us better humans. Here's your host, Christina Eanes.
Hi, everyone. I'm Christina Eanes, host of Essential Skills for Humaning podcast. Thank you so much for joining us today for today's episode. We have Steve Acho. Welcome, Steve.
Thanks so much. Appreciate you having me.
Well, I'm excited to get into this topic about, I have it right here, simplify complexity to achieve more. But before we do that, can you tell us a little bit about your background?
Yeah, you bet. Well, first of all, I want to give you a compliment because I'm jealous of the name of the podcast. I think it'd be a cool book. And it's essentially what drives me is to try and be a better human. So Essential Skills for Humaning is just such a cool name that I'm jealous of. So nice work there.
Thank you.
My background is I'm in the Detroit area. I was born and raised in Detroit. My father's an immigrant from Iraq. My mom is from here in the U.S. And I've lived all my life here, other than about 4 years in Japan. So I learned Japanese in high school and college and worked my way through as a translator and interpreter. And then I moved to Japan and ended up working for the president of Mazda and traveling throughout Asia and getting more into business than in just the language part of it, even though I'm a language geek. So I have, for years, I've always been athletic. I've been into martial arts since I was a little kid. Actually got an athletic scholarship to college since I was a C student. I was not going to get in with my grades. So graduated with international studies, and then I did my MBA while I was working and living in Japan. And basically, I'm one of those guys that does so many things that they say jack of all trades or whatever, but it really is, it's kind of, I end up being one of those people that has a hard time answering the question, what do you do? Like if I meet someone, I'm like, what do I tell this person? Now, if I've been performing music for about 20 years professionally. I've been on TV. I've been on Japanese TV. I've done, lots of music stuff all over the world. I just call it kind of my passion that I'm lucky enough to make money at. And so, when someone says, what do you do? It kind of depends on the context, right? If I just got off stage, I'll talk about music. So I enjoy doing lots of different things and essentially am a bit of a lunatic about self-improvement. So that's why your podcast and the title of it especially is just how to be a better human in every aspect, right? Personal and business and relationships, health, wealth, all those things.
I love it. And it's so hard because that's like the question that people like to ask, what do you do? Right?
Natural. I mean,
I prefer who are you?
Yeah.
Like,
right.
What?
Yeah. Who are you? One of the questions that people have asked that's, maybe a little bit better than that is like, hey, it's nice to meet you. Like, so how do you spend most of your time or something like that, right? Or some people say like, what do you do on your free time? Let's not talk business. Yeah. We're at a wedding. What do you do on your free time? Or, something like that, where you can connect as a human instead of saying like, I'm Steve, I'm a musician. Oh, I'm Jake, I'm an accountant. Great. Where do we go from there? How do you like your morning? Like you get to humaning really quick. So.
Yes. I love those deep conversations.
Yeah, for sure.
So speaking of deep conversations today, we're going to talk about simplify complexity. And simplify stands for something, I believe.
Simplify itself isn't. So I ended up creating this framework and I wrote a book on it, and I've written a couple books. I wrote a third book and I never released it, and I don't think I ever will, but it helped me organize my thoughts. And that's probably what you're thinking of is I have this acronym that is SMILE, SMILE. And it's just kind of an accidental framework that I stumbled upon that helps people. I'm really big on rapid learning, not learning for the sake of impressing people or anything like that, or just saying like, I'm Steve and I can do 20 different things. But just you want to be functional at things, right? Yeah. So I found that there is a framework that applies when you simplify the complexity of, think of how complex it is to say, I don't know anything about music. I want to learn how to play guitar. That's complex. I've never spoken another language. I want to learn Japanese. And that is daunting, especially to an adult, right? So I developed this framework and put it in an order called SMILE, SMILE, that people can remember, and really challenge myself to make it apply to every area of life. And I can give, I do like hour-long keynote speeches where I play music, but it's integrated into the point that I'm making. And then I also write a custom song that's kind of a surprise for the audience that they don't know about. But essentially the keynote, or what now is, the book turned into a live performance, is really just that framework that you can leave and apply to just about any aspect of your life that could be improved: health, wealth, relationships, hobbies, business. And depending on who I'm talking to and what the context is, I can apply it to, everything from losing weight to getting better at a sport, to learning how to do, some new hobby, to, if you have your own business, like defining your target market, and really like applying the 80-20 rule in every aspect of your life, that where the things that I'm talking about don't sound like they have anything to do with one another, right? So for example, I apply the same framework. So I kind of created this framework after a lot of, I would say, using myself as a guinea pig and experiment, that I found helped me learn to be very functionally fluent in the Japanese language while I was in Japan. And I also applied it to other people to make sure I wasn't just some lunatic weirdo, which I probably am. I haven't ruled that out. But I wanted to make sure it wasn't something special. So there were like a dozen people that I took through this process, and I end up just like copywriting it. Like I have IP on this thing, but it really is the same framework for learning language quickly that you could apply to playing the guitar, that you could apply to finding your target market, that you could apply to healing from an injury 90% faster, to hiring the right person for your company the first time. All of those things sound like completely separate topics, but what I realized about myself is I'm kind of a nonconformist. I'm not like against the world. I don't walk on my hands because everybody else walks. You know what I mean? Some people are, I think that's like called a contrarian or a jerk. But for me, it's just like, I question answers, right? And so it's like, okay, this is, if I learned to speak fluent Japanese and it took me 15 years, I want to deconstruct that and make it so you can get where I am in 2 years, or maybe even 6 months. If, depending on how much time you have, I can tell you the formula. And that formula applies to everything, right? So that's kind of my passion, really.
Ooh. So I'm thinking there's a lot of ears perking up, and they're like, okay, what is this formula? I'm ready to do it.
Sure.
So how do we smile?
So I'll give you a couple aspects of it first. I think
sure.
One of the most important things that people look over, I think, is they decide that they want to learn how to do something well or get functional in it. And so they pick a goal, and we've all probably been exposed to the SMART objectives, right? So pick measurable, attainable, what's the R? Relevant and time bound.
Relevant, yeah.
and that's great, right? We've all been taught to not say like, I should lose weight, but we should say, I'm going to lose 20 pounds by October 1st, 2024, right? And that is a good way to set goals. There really isn't any kind of framework for like, that's great. How do you achieve them? Right. And so the relevant part is one thing that I focus on. And then the specific one is the one that I focus on. And so SMART objectives are a great way to set goals. But the big thing I encourage people to start with is, what do you actually want to do? Because success, the word success is very personal, right? Like if Oprah's, we all know Oprah, right? I don't even have to say her last name. Now, if her
does she have a last name?
Yeah, right. She doesn't need one anymore. I'll probably get in trouble for saying her name. But she didn't do this. But if she had set it as a goal to acquire, amass a bunch of wealth and fame, wealth, but not fame, right? And be anonymous, like, she's failed. I'm not saying she did that, but we're assuming that that's success. So we think of successful people as the ones that have a lot of money, the ones that we know, right? But we define success. And so what happens is when we first set a goal, which could be anything from, I want to learn to play the guitars, I want to learn to speak Japanese, to I'm going to start a business and I want to get my first 3 customers. I mean, I could go on and on with the list.
Yeah.
The very first and most important thing is that you make that personal goal something that is extremely personal to you, right? It's relevant. That's where the R comes in the SMART objectives, right? So one example that I use a lot, because people say it, New Year's resolutions in January, which last until about January 20th. Most people's lists have something on there that will say something like lose weight. So it's common to say lose weight. Just to use this as an example, because it's so common, most people that say they want to lose weight don't mean they want to lose weight. They don't mean they want to weigh less, right? And I have this great picture when I do the presentation of a before and after picture of this woman that is just an incredible 12-week transformation. But the reason I show it is because before she weighed 140 pounds and after she weighed 140 pounds. And she would not have been able to do that transformation had she said, I want to lose weight. She would have quit. And so where you start, the question that you ask, the goal that you set for yourself is really important to be very specific and meaningful and obviously measurable. But what's important to you? So people say lose weight because it's just an easy thing. Like all you do is just step on a scale, look down and go, okay, I'm 180. Great. If tomorrow I'm 179, I've done better. But I mean, you could get sick and weigh 179 tomorrow, right? So it's a question of like, really, what are your specific measurable things that matter to you? And so when people come to me with specific goals that they think are specific, I will drill down into that. So it's not enough to say, I want to learn how to play guitar. You have to say, all right, well, do you want to be able to sit by yourself and read music and play a classical guitar piece by yourself exactly how it's written? Is that your measure? Or do you want to be able to bang out a bunch of songs around the campfire with friends while everyone is drinking and singing along? There is no better or worse, but you have to get really specific. And both of those are going to put you on different paths, right? So the first is like to just be very specific with what the goal is and make it matter. So if you don't mean lose weight and you mean, for example, look great naked, I want to own that, right? Or look great in a bathing suit, like own that. Picture of yourself in a bathing suit, front, side, back, put it away, don't look at it, go follow some regimen, and then see if you made it. But throw out the scale if that's not what you're measuring. So that's kind of the analogy that I use. I mean it when it comes to weight. If you really don't care what you weigh, and there's some people that should, by the way, that's not everyone, right? I do MMA. Some of my friends are professional fighters. They have to weigh 150 pounds on Friday or they can't get paid on Saturday. And there are other people that are morbidly obese and absolutely they should lose 20 pounds because it's friendly. But most humans that say I want to lose weight don't mean that. They mean I want to fit into my jeans or whatever. So I think that's a really important first step, is just to be very specific with and measurable with the goal that you mean, right? So I just gave an example of, weight and music, but I mean, all of it applies to pretty much any aspect of business, right?
Yeah. So make it meaningful for each of us. And then what do we do?
Personal, meaningful, right. So now you've got what you want to achieve. And I think, so you have to measure the thing that matters, right? And that's inherent in that. So in other words, I'm not going to weigh myself because I really don't care about the weight. So I throw the scale away. Let me map that to a couple other things. So you have a great podcast and you could say success is measured by the number of listeners, and that's fine. There are some people that, like Seth Godin, who's like one of the most prolific authors in the world when it comes to business and marketing, has the most. I think he started the first blog. I don't think blog was a word when he was doing it.
Yeah.
He doesn't know or measure how many people are subscribed to his blog because he says, I'm not going to do anything with the answer. If 1,000 people unsubscribe tomorrow, I'm not going to do anything different. I write this for people who care about what I write about. If 1,000 more people come, that's great. And so it's like you have to actively get rid of and measure what doesn't matter. So now that when you're clear about what you want to do, then I think it's important to apply the 80-20 rule. And 80-20 just, everybody's heard it and we know that it applies. I think wealth distribution is usually the first way people learn that, right? We know that 20% of the people in America hold 80% of the wealth. What a lot of people don't know is that scales up and down. So of the top 10 most wealthy people in America, for example, the top 2 people, which is hold 80% of the wealth, right? Then at the bottom 8. Right? So literally 20% of the people have 80% of the wealth, even in the top 10. So that scales up and down. And it's not just academic. I mean, you could apply it to everything in your personal life, like your wardrobe, right? If you have 100 pieces of clothing, I guarantee, or 1,000, you wear 20% of your wardrobe 80% of the time, or just without getting into numbers, like most of the time you wear a small percentage of the things that you own, right? So fine, that's academic, that's interesting, cool. It's an economic theory that Wilfred Pareto came up with in the 1800s. But why does it matter? How do you apply it? Well, for example, I'll use like learning another language, for example. So there are 250,000 words in English. Someone like me who has an advanced degree and really strives to communicate better for a living only uses 1,000 out of 250,000. That's not 80-20. That's 99 or whatever it is. So think about this. Think about a Chinese person or a Portuguese person or whatever who never learned English and just moves to America or some English-speaking country, and all they know is there's 250,000 words. That is daunting. If all you know, though, is that someone like me only uses 1,000, right? And all my writing and all my emails and all my formal and informal conversations and presentations, that's hundreds of words. That's not that many. Right? Yeah. So that immediately makes it more attainable. Another example I can use that I use in music, and when I'm on stage, I have a piano or a keyboard, and I explain that a chord is made up of 3 or 4 notes, right? 3 or 4 notes played together. There is an infinite number. There's 88 keys. I don't know, someone do the math, but it's roughly infinite. How many chords are there, right? But if you know 4 chords, 4 combinations of chords, you barely move your hands, and I play it in front of the people, I say, watch what you can do. Watch how many songs you can play. And I play the 4 chords in the same order. And I start singing about 15 songs that are just the same chord progression. And then I say, if you play those same 4 chords in a different order, here's a bunch of other songs. I could go on and on, but I'm not going to. If you add a 5th chord, now you could play hundreds of songs. So does that make you a master of piano or a master of English? Or no, but if you want to be functional in a skill, you should know that some version of the 80-20 principle applies. And it's usually not 80-20. It's usually like 95-5. And that's the same. I can map that to company. Like I used to work for the CEO of Ford Motor Company. At the time, they had 35 products. They had 35 vehicles that they sold. One of those vehicles, the F-150, was responsible, check this out, for 95% of the profit of Ford Motor Company global. Like, I don't even know what the math is on that, but that's incredible, right? But it also applies. So when I play music, I record a lot. I have about 180 songs on every platform, right? iTunes and Spotify and everywhere you can listen to music or download or stream or steal. My music is there. That more than the 80-20 rule applies. So my top 15 songs probably make me 95% of the money, even though people listen to the other songs, but not as much. But think about it. Ford Motor Company has the same thing. And by the way, so does Taylor Swift. So that distribution is everywhere, right? And people use examples like if you have 10 salespeople, you probably have 2 of them that are pulling in 80% of the revenue. So it's worthwhile to know that a small portion, the important portion of something that you're trying to achieve, will ensure that you are very quickly able to be functional, not world class. Right? I'm not world class in anything. Everything that I do, I'm surrounded by people who are better, but I'm functional. I mean, I've just me and a piano. I have played concerts in front of tens of thousands of people on international TV. I've traveled all over the world. And I never learned how to read music. I wouldn't pass the third grade music class, but I knew what I wanted to be able to do. And I just went all in on that and pretty much, was OCD about it and just, nailed that part of it. And so that's how I apply that kind of 80-20 lens to just about everything. Who are the handful of customers? If you have 100 customers, right? Like, who are the handful that we want to profile and duplicate, right? And it also works the other way. Who are the handful of customers that are responsible for wasted time, fire them. Get 90% of your time back, right? So it just applies to so many aspects of life that when you think about it, right? If you have 5 close friends, 80% is 1. So one of those you probably consider your best friend, and they're probably responsible for most of the joy and the positive emotions that you get. And I bet one of them is responsible for most of the toxicity and you're thinking of someone. I always tell audience, you're trying to think of who that person is in your group and you can't think of who it is.
It's you.
I want the selfie, but I'm not saying it. But just notice how it applies to all aspects of our life, and not just notice it as an academic exercise, but just say, and this is really the question, forget Pareto principle and 80-20 and numbers. What are the critical few things that matter versus the trivial many? That's the lens that I use. So when I'm hiring someone, like my IT staffing company, typically companies in my industry have a 10% take rate. That means if you call me and say, Steve, I need a, Java developer. And I say, great, I'm going to send you one. And you've got a bunch of companies sending Java developers. Everyone expects that 1 out of 10 resumes that they send you will turn into a hire. Okay? Mm-hmm. That's acceptable in the industry. We are over 9 out of 10. And the reason we're over 9 out of 10 is because we kind of apply the 80-20 rule. And I would say, Christina, you told me that you want someone with this job title who has X years of experience, but what are the few most important things they have to do? Don't worry about degrees and years of experience. What do they have to do to be successful? And then what I'm going to do is look through my network and find someone who's capable of doing that. And we'll argue why, and motivated to do that same thing for you, as opposed to just doing it anywhere for any company. That's why we have a 9 or 10 times the acceptance rate, because we're really focusing on the few things that do matter, right? Yeah. Does that make sense?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And that's where the simplify comes in. So whatever we're trying to accomplish, identify those very specific behaviors.
I call it a hack.
That will have the most impact.
But you're right. Simplify is a better word. It makes me look a little less uneducated than when I call myself a hack, right?
But I also like it because we're hacking the system. Yeah. We're figuring out the easiest way to get through.
I actually don't find that
with the
word.
Least amount of effort.
You're right. I mean, that's what it is, right? It's like, if you think about it, you like a tennis player, if you call a tennis player a hack, right? It's like, they're not really doing.
Might get a little offended. But
they'll be offended, right? So it's usually got a bad connotation. I call myself a proud professional hack because I'm really asking the question, like, what do I have to do to be functional and good? Not what are all the things I need to learn, right? So that's kind of what.
Yeah. I love it. So we get really clear on what we want to do, make it personal, and then identify the biggest return on investment as far as the behaviors we involve
best
in.
Leverage, best ROI.
I love it.
That's great. And then I think that there's something that once you're clear on that, right? So you know exactly what you want to achieve. You know exactly what the ingredients are, I'll say, right? The 4 or 5 chords, the 300 phrases in English that will get you by 90% of the time. And that depends on your environment, of course, but like I can coach people on that in like 2 sessions. So I don't give English lessons. I will help people like reduce their accent or figure out like where in a 5-minute conversation, like, okay, you are going to multiply your people's view of you as a native English speaker if you just do these 5 things. I can tell you right now. And then they practice them and then boom, it goes right up, right? So now that you know, you've identified exactly what you want to do and what success is going to look like, right? I want to be able to play 100 songs on a guitar with all my friends around the campfire. Like that's the goal. Okay? And then you've identified that. So then it comes down to doing the work, right? But I think there's certain things that humans are naturally, we have bad intuitions about. And so one example I use is, do you remember the first time you learned about compound interest? I was in middle school. My dad's a math guy. So I brought this home and I was like, this can't be right. The 25-year-old that invests $50 a month in the stock market and like that exponential growth, it's like, oh my God, like that can't be right. We have bad intuitions, right? About things like that. So there's another example of where I think people have bad intuitions about themselves and they underestimate how quickly neurons fire and wire together when they focus on something to the exclusion of everything else, no multitasking, for like 10 minutes, right? So let's say, I'll just give one example. So you tell me, Steve, I want to learn how to speak Japanese. So my first goal in doing this, to be very specific, is I want to be able to introduce myself in a I guess, business setting, a professional setting, and an informal setting. So let's start there. And then my next goal will be to have a 5-minute conversation. Like, those are great goals, right? So it turns out that in Japanese, think of English, how many ways there are, like, pleased to meet you, nice to meet you, how do you do? My pleasure. Like, and we could come up with 100 different ways. There's lots of different ways. It turns out that in the Japanese language, there are a dozen. There are 12 words you have to learn, and you could meet the emperor or your friend's drunk friend at a bar. You would have all of them. And so if you think about focusing, and when I do this on stage, I do a little example of, I have everyone doing it, right? Where knows multitasking is bad. I don't have to tell them that. But I have them feel in their body how it's bad, because I have them do an exercise on paper where they have to kind of go from one thing to another thing to this to that. And they realize how much of a tax it is to go back and forth.
Huge.
I mean, it's so different. And then I do an exercise where I bring someone up, and I there's a couple of things I do, but like one of them is like throw a ball when they have their backs turned, and then they have to turn around and catch it. They're so focused. So like, think about that focus for 10 minutes. 10 minutes. If you set a timer for 10 minutes, no phone near you, no music, no noise, no nothing, and you did anything, but let's just pick 12 words in Japanese. If you did that for 10 minutes a day, after a year, you would have spent 60 hours saying 12 words. You would sound like a UN translator. Obviously, you would learn more than that, right? Because you'd be motivated to learn more because you'd see how well you were doing. But I bet in 10 minutes, you would learn that, and it would be like a song stuck in your head, right?
Yeah.
And so I think the most important point that I haven't really, I've been glossing around, but I haven't really got to, but I think the silver bullet of all of this, and the reason to kind of hack or simplify or whatever, is that motivation, I think, is either misunderstood or underrated. You can be motivated by your parents, by a coach, by your heroes, by Tony Robbins. There's so many things that are motivational to me. And that kind of has a shelf life a little bit. It's not, I'm very motivated by these things, but maybe for 48 hours or maybe months, it doesn't matter, but it's not intrinsic. I'm not intrinsically motivated, right? So one thing that Simon Sinek famously is famous for, he has a book called Find Your Why. If you have a why you want to do this, you're much more likely to get through the hard times. That's one thing, right? But the other thing is, you will be intrinsically motivated if, and this is my argument, you feel like you're making progress. And
Yes.
you will quit if you don't. So back to
Yes.
the example of the woman who had this incredible 12-week transformation of her body. Imagine going on a 12-week intense nutritional and exercise program and then weighing yourself 4 weeks into it and saying, I weigh the same, I fail.
Yeah.
She just had picked the wrong metric. Now, luckily, this woman, and I'm not saying everybody that, has too much weight wants to look like a bodybuilder. I'm not suggesting.
Yeah.
I'm just saying, say what you mean and own it, right? And so really the silver bullet of all of this is that knowledge or understanding how to do something is not really motivating. There are no external factors that are long-term, consistently, persistently, implicitly motivational. But what is the feeling of progress. If I feel like I'm a better Japanese speaker, guitar player, communicator, businessman, whatever it is this month than I did last month, that is fulfillment to me. That's what I think success is. Success is fulfillment. And I think fulfillment comes from feeling like we are getting better. And if you want to do something, you have a passion for it or a hobby, or you play tennis or something, and seems really fun, and you're just like, oh man, I've tried it. I've been doing it for 2 months and I'm just not any better. I quit. A lot of people will quit up front, like I did. I was 7 years old and I took one music class, and it was so overwhelming that I never thought about music again until my parents took me to a Billy Joel concert when I was 17. So for 10 years, I was like, I love music, but I'm not smart enough to understand it. I'll never be able to do it. And then I started messing around on the piano with 2 fingers and then 3 fingers and listening to albums. And one of my friends was like, just learn a handful of chords. And I'm like, what chords? Yeah. And then he taught me. And then I applied that principle to everything. So really like the key takeaway, I think, is whatever kind of hack you want to use, be really clear about what the outcome is and own it. So don't say, I want to lose weight if what you really want is, to fit into your high school jeans. In fact, don't say, I want 1 million subscribers, right? If what you mean is, I want to make an impact as measured by some other metric that doesn't matter how many subscribers you have, right? Or, just like, let's just take the personal out of it. Like, I want to sell 1,000 widgets. I don't care how many likes and shares and nice comments and stuff I get on my social media posts. I know that's a metric, but it's only a valuable metric in that it helps me get to the goal of selling more widgets. So if I could find another way to sell more widgets, I'm going to use that. I'm going to test a bunch of things. So that's really the lesson, is like, focus on the exact thing that matters to you because it's personal. Own what success means to you. Say it. I want to look great in a, bathing suit, right? As opposed to I want to lose weight. Throw out the scale, know how you're going to measure it, find the 80-20. So find the few most important things that you have to do to achieve that goal versus the trivial many things that you could do, right? Mm-hmm. And then this only works, and it does work because you feel like you're making progress. And I can tell you, I went through 2 years of high school Japanese, and I went to Japan with my karate instructor in 1990. And I realized like I was completely unprepared for actual Japanese. And I was learning it, right? No fault of the teacher at the time, but then I took it upon myself to say like, okay, how does this actually work? I want to be able to be functional in the language, not say I've been studying it for 5 years. I know 1,000 words. It's like, it doesn't matter unless you can string them together and have a conversation with someone, right? So that's really the question, is how can I do the least possible focused work so that I feel like I'm making progress towards specifically what I want to be able to do or be or have, any of those things. That's the simplify. And that's the reason I call myself a proud professional hack, because those are the questions I'll ask. When someone says, I want to do this, and I say, do you really want to do that? Right? Like maybe they don't, right? They say, I want to grow my business. Why do you want to grow your business? Because I want this. Why do you want that? Because of this outcome. Okay, so what you really want is that outcome. Is there any other way to do it let's talk about other ways to do it. There might be more direct ways, right? So that's kind of the approach and the nonconformist thinking that I think is important in a world where we have to be very quickly adaptable, right?
Absolutely. Oh, I love it. I know there's going to be a lot of people rethinking their goals today.
I hope so. And I hope the way that I want to leave audiences, whether I'm in front of them personally or this way, is not, there's nothing that I say about myself that I mean to come across as bragging or anything like that. I say them to, what I really want for people is to be inspired by their own enormous potential to achieve something, even if like one thing that people remember is the 250,000 words versus the hundreds that you and I actually use, and we are professional communicators. That just makes something less daunting and more approachable, right? Just before you get into it, it's like, wow, if I learn dozens of words, I'm in a conversation. That's great, right? Mm-hmm. So I hope it helps them rethink their own potential.
I love it. Well, now, before we get to your final piece of advice, can you share how our audience members can learn more about you and what you do?
Absolutely, yeah. Well, I'm one of those weirdos that has a really hard time answering the simple question, what do you do? You probably are too, right? I imagine you're in multiple things. You could say I have a podcast, but that's one of the things you do. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, just my name, Steve Acho, Steve, Acho. If you just Google that, my name will come up, and luckily I don't have a prison record, so nothing bad I know of. But steveacho.com is really not selling you anything, but it's just a digital business card that answers the question, what do you do? And, has links to the advertising company that I work with, to the IT company that I run, to music, to writing custom songs, to keynotes, and all of that stuff. So, or LinkedIn. Nice. LinkedIn's a great place too.
There we go. Cool. Okay, what is your final piece of advice for our audience?
Final piece of advice. If I could leave the world with one thing, I would say to anytime you want to improve something about your life, view it as an experiment and try something to see if you're moving in the direction of better, not perfection, but better. And keep doing that and keep experimenting until you find something that is working. And that will help you recognize your own enormous potential to achieve. Because I think people give up quickly or even before they start. I hear so many people that say, I'm just not good at language. And I was like, man, I'm just not good at music. I knew that for 10 years. And now I have something like 60 million streams on Spotify of my music, and I'm not on a record label. Nobody's promoting my music or anything like that, right? Like, how do you get from one to the other? Something made me intrinsically motivated and inspired to keep going and doing it, right? So I just found that thing and applied it to different things. So I would say that's the lesson I hope that people take, is that you have way more potential than you realize.
I love it. And now they have a system for realizing it. I love it. Oh, thank you so much for taking the time to spend with us
You're
today.
very welcome. I hope people will be better humans because of it.
Thank you for tuning in to the Essential Skills for Humaning podcast. We hope you've gained valuable insights to enhance your journey as a human being. Remember, practice makes progress. Keep honing those essential skills. And until next time, keep being the best version of yourself. For more resources, visit eanestraining.com.